Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. My name is Jackson Mummy, and each week we'll be bringing you updated information about the bar exam and what you need to do in order to make the next bar exam your last bar exam. Ready to get started? Let's jump to it. Hey everybody, welcome. Today is Wednesday, April 12th. I hope you all had a good holiday, and now we are beginning the process of getting serious results in across the country from the February exams and starting our studies and work for the July 2023 bar exam. Joined today, as always, by our coaches, Tracy, Amanda, and Brianna. June is on the chat box. June's back from her vacation, but she got sick. And not that you can get sick over Zoom, but we thought it would be better to not hear her cough. So she'll be on the chat box and she will be with us. And we're glad to have her back. So it's good to see all of you. We have a lot to talk about, in particular, the Florida results, which came out yesterday. And I'm going to call on Tracy and Amanda and Brianna as we start to talk about these results. And we're going to, the four of us have not really had much of a chance to talk about them. We will do this in real time, and you will get to hear and see what we go through and what this process is. We've got our live boot camp coming up here in Denver, May 19th and 20th. This is a 2-day event with me and Tracy and June and some surprises. We will be teaching you how to photo read. We will be teaching you how to mind map. We will be teaching you how to apply photo reading and mind mapping to all of the different skills, essay writing, multiple choice test taking, performance tests. All of that is done in a small setting. We are limiting boot camp to 15 people. So that is really pretty hands-on training to get that time with me in particular. It sounds pretty egotistical, but to get 2 days with me and there's only 15 people is pretty valuable. But Tracy will be there and she will be assisting and working with me on the writing and the coaching part of it. And June will be there to do her mindset work, which is incredibly helpful. We think boot camp is one of the most powerful tools that we can offer you. Now, because there are only 15 seats available, as soon as results come out every year, we start to get people enrolling in boot camp. Encourage you to do that. June can put the link up in the chat box. There is a refundable application fee of $100. And if you apply and you are selected, that $100 is applied towards your bootcamp fee. If you are not selected, we'll refund the deposit fee to you. The only reason we're doing the application is we want to make sure that you're really going to benefit from coming to boot camp. And so we found with 15 people, we sell out. How do we pick the right 15? Well, we do it through this application process. As I said, we're going to be here in Denver. We will cover everything except your travel and hotel. We're going to take care of most of your meals while you're here. We're in a wonderful facility that I'm excited about. This is our first time doing boot camp outside of Florida, so this will be an interesting opportunity. So make sure you sign up for boot camp. If you've got questions about boot camp, let us know. And frankly, if you're in the chat box and there's something that's keeping you from attending boot camp, I'd love to have you type that into the chat box or send a note to June, so that we can answer those questions, because sometimes there are things that people think, oh, I can't go to boot camp because, and it's not really a good reason to not attend. We continue to find boot camp to be the most effective tool for students to prepare for the bar exam. So I really encourage you to join us. It's a great opportunity to have that one-on-one time and to have the ability to get the resources that you need. Now we get to the main feature today, which are results. In the past few days, we have gotten results in a number of jurisdictions. Most of them are small in terms of the numbers of bar takers. It's really interesting that for the first time ever, the NCBE is reporting out some new data for us. And one of the new pieces of data is how many bar takers there are in particular jurisdictions. Were any of you surprised by how many jurisdictions have fewer than like 75 or 50 bar takers in the February test? Did that surprise you at all, Brianna, when you saw that?
I'm just now hearing that for the first time, but
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
that's absolutely shocking.
Yeah. We have states like Iowa, Montana, and Nebraska that had fewer than 50 bar takers. So I want to point that out because when you're starting with those kinds of small numbers, statistically, you just can't read anything into that. New Mexico bounced up and down from last year to this year, but they had 50 people taking the exam. What do you do with that? The bigger states tend to be a little more stable, and we can read more into it, but still, the giant in the room will be Florida, and we will talk about that last. But let me talk about a couple of other jurisdictions that reported out this week and what we are hearing from them. One of the bigger jurisdictions was Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania had a little over 500 bar takers. Their overall pass rate was 44%. Their first time bar taker pass rate was 55%, and their repeat bar taker rate was 37%. Now, 44% overall, you're holding your breath. That's not good news. And Amanda, you've talked about this pretty frequently, but I think it's worth saying again, this is a failure of the system, not of the applicants. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why we look at the numbers, because they're important and they tell us things. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's hard for me to think that any profession that regulates how law schools are run and then puts these things into place could really look at themselves and say that this is a successful way to admit attorneys to their bar. So I think that we all need to look at that because it's low, right? And if we can compare to other professions, and analogies aren't the greatest, there are issues with comparison, right? But we want to make sure like we're comparing apples to apples, and here it just seems like 44%. Wow, what's going on there? Although I will say with Pennsylvania, that's overall, but with the repeat takers, I'm wondering if you were going to talk about that, because correct me if I'm wrong, I think Pennsylvania just went through a switch, which is why I think some of the repeat takers are having an even harder time there.
I think that's exactly right. What happened was, for those of you that don't know, Pennsylvania went from their own specific exam to the UBE. And so you've got people that are retaking, but now taking in effect a new exam, and it's going to have an impact for sure. I think ultimately the UBE is the better test to take, and I think that will level itself out in a while. But for right now, I think it is challenging.
But it bears repeating, because it's also a lot of, it's expense, it's money, it's delayed earning, and they're doing this change, and a change is coming up. And how are we going to roll out this change? How are we going to make it? We know the change is coming in 2025. How are we going to make it equitable for the people who have to take 2024 and then need to retake? So it's not an equitable situation.
2024 is going to be a really challenging year. I'm not going to lie about that. And we're going to be talking about that, I'm sure, as we roll out of July 2023. But it's going to be a tough year because we start the transition into the new exam. And we've got states like Florida and California and Georgia, which apparently are not going to go to the next generation bar exam. Again, I think we're seeing the leading edge of that in Florida this week, and it's going to change things. And so there's a lot happening. There's a lot of inside bar review that's happening right now. It's a little unsettling, to be perfectly honest. So we're staying on top of it. There's nobody with a crystal ball out there that can tell you exactly what's going to happen and what these states are going to do and how this test is going to play out. So the primary piece of advice I want to make sure everybody hears right now is take the exam now. Do not keep deferring. This is going to get more complicated as we get into 2024. It's going to be way different in 2025. And I can't tell you it's going to be different better. I can't tell you it's going to be different worse. I can just tell you it's going to be different. And I think that what we've got to do, and what I really want people to do, is get in, take this exam, take the exam that's in front of you and pass this exam and get it over with. Move on with your life, obviously. If you're someone that took the exam in February of 2023 and you did not pass, I know we've got some questions about people saying, should I sit out an exam or wait a year? My advice to you is going to be, nope. Get in and get this thing done, nail it and kick it out. in July. Don't wait. This is going to get weirder and weirder, I think, in 2024, particularly if you're in Florida, California, or Georgia. So something to just keep in mind. Thanks for raising that point. Let me talk about a couple of other states besides Florida where we got results in. In Washington State, 260 bar takers. That's all. It's not a big number, but the overall rate, 47%. The first time rate, 56%. The repeater rate, 37%. So tracking Pennsylvania very closely, again, a UBE state. And again, under 50% pass rate overall. Those are, when we see under 50% for a bar overall, that's a number that gives me a lot of concern. Absolutely. And I'm old enough at this to remember that when the overall pass rates used to be 75, 80, 90, 85%. So clearly we're in a different world in Washington State, which I think has been actually one of the more progressive states in terms of finding alternate methods of licensing and trying to do more things, being a little bit more progressive, but they're tracking exactly the same as Pennsylvania. So that was interesting to me. Third state I just want to call out is Indiana. This has at times been a larger state, this time only about 170 bar takers, so not a big number. Their pass rate overall was 50%. Their first time rate was 62%, and their repeater rate was 42%. Well, I like 42%. That's certainly better than we're seeing elsewhere, but again, on a very small sample size. That's Indiana, a UBE state. And then we had results in Iowa, Montana, and Nebraska. Again, fewer than 75 takers. So the numbers really don't mean a whole lot there. And then I believe Missouri has released results, but I do not have the statistics yet. I know that those results, I think they came out yesterday or the day before. Missouri is one of the UBE states with a passing threshold of 260. And so we will update you next week on what those statistics look like from Missouri, but those results are out. So that is what we have seen other than Florida. We ready to go to Florida?
Jackson, I'm curious a little bit. I read a very interesting article. I know I'm not necessarily the moderator on here, but
No, go ahead.
it commented on the fact that some of these bar takers are emerging out of when the students entered law school right at COVID.
Yeah.
So that it delayed some students in taking the bar exam now, or whether they took time off during COVID. And whether or not that first year of law school could have had an impact because it was remote as to what those students are taking into the bar exam. And I'm just curious if you have comment on that and if any of our other coaches have comment as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually the executive director of the national conference that made that remark and said the reason that the multi-state scores are down is because it was remote learning for COVID. That was number one. And number two, there's so many repeat bar takers, and repeat bar takers just don't do well on the exam, and they're not well prepared, and they're less than. I was disappointed in those comments. I thought that they were, let me go to the second comment about the being less prepared and repeat bar takers and so on. All of us work with repeat bar takers here. It just hasn't been our experience. Our students do better than those averages for sure. And they work hard, and they're very talented and very capable people. And so I guess I take some offense when I see that comment, because I just don't think that's a legitimate criticism to make. And I think it's a broad generalization. I just don't think it exists and should be. I think it's an attempt to deflect the weaknesses of the exam itself. Look, the national conference is changing the exam because it's not a good test. It's not doing what it's supposed to do right now. And I would prefer that they just own that and say, look, we're trying as fast as we can to get this new test out here. But while we do that, we've got a test that's flawed and has problems, and it's going to make it more difficult. As to the COVID piece, we've always taught remotely, and I don't know. I think all of us probably went to school, law school, locally, live, but I don't know that we can say because you did your first year of law school remotely, you're not as good as somebody that sat in a classroom and played foxhole bingo or whatever you did. I don't know. What's your take on this? Amanda, you got any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think again, I do think it's a deflection, maybe not looking hard enough. Yes, a lot of law schools had to flip quickly to remote learning. And I actually worked at a law school during that time, and a lot of faculty, they worked really hard to do that. The students were working really hard. Of course, there were other stressors, but I think there's more going on there. And I find it unfortunate because I don't think we're delving deeper, right?
Yeah.
Who, in terms of equity, who did COVID impact the most? Did it impact the people who are not able to access tutors on campus? But also it expanded equity in some ways, learning online, right? For people who have different abilities or differently abled, and provided access for people who need to take care of families. So it discourages me that they're also dismissing online or hybrid learning, right?
Yeah.
So instead of taking a critical look at their test and how it fits in with the modern world, right? I would have liked to hear maybe something more. Although online, we can't measure the impact of online learning right now and the impact of COVID, it's worth it to examine the structure of our exam and how it fits in with our new modern world and the lessons we've learned from COVID. So that's what I think. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk, but
no, I appreciate that. Tracy, you got any thoughts about that?
No, because when I took the bar exam, we didn't even have computers or online or anything.
You just carved pictures of dinosaurs in the cave walls.
Basically, we had to take the exam with number 2 pencils, the entire exam, including the essays. And there weren't accommodations. You just lean into it and you either passed or you didn't. All I know is when the letter came that day, I was terrified.
Yeah, there you go. And
fortunately, I passed.
Yeah, there you go. Babka is going to join us today. I'm excited. Babka is one of our other group coaches. I neglected to talk about what his group coaching call. There he is, Babka. My man, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How you doing?
Oh, great. Good to see you. We're so glad you could be here. I know we're taking time out of your busy day as well. And for those of you that don't know, Babka does a group coaching call on, is it Saturday or Sundays? What day do you do it? Sundays. What time?
Noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Okay. And yeah. So it's exciting. Babka, we've been talking about results and the comments that have been made by bar examiners that the results are lower generally because of COVID. Lots of students started during the COVID period, and that also the repeat bar takers just aren't as talented and good. And just to catch you up and anybody that's joining us, our view is that's really deflection, that the test itself is the deficiency here, not the bar takers. Would you agree with that statement?
I would totally agree. And at the same time, it's what has happened, but what are you doing personally to change that circumstance? Because it's statistics at the end of the day, but what are you doing to make yourself an exception to the statistic? Because speaking from my own personal experience, I took the bar exam 6 times. Brianna I was one of Brianna's students, and now look at it, we are colleagues now. Yeah. So when I look at, and California is like a beast, it's like an animal, but it was like, hey, these are the odds, these are the chances of you passing. I was like, hey, so long as I have a chance of passing, I knew I needed to do something different to pass. And of course, here we are on the other side. So it's like putting yourself to the task and making sure you do the work. The exam is not going to change, but how you approach this exam has to change in order to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's real wisdom, folks. I also want to say, before we get to the I'll keep saying we're going to get to the Florida results. I just want to say, we want to celebrate the successes that have occurred. We're going to talk about these numbers. The numbers are not wonderful, but there are successes, and we've had successes. We've had a fair number of people who passed in Florida and some of these other jurisdictions. We will, as always, endeavor to do interviews. I always have to twist people's arms to say, would you be willing to do an interview with me? But we do have successes, and our students are doing what Bob could describe. They're looking at the situation and say, what do I have to do to pass? What's it going to take for me? And then working forward to make that happen. If you're one of the people who did not at this point pass, and Tracy's been really good about reminding me that we're not saying that you failed, it's that you didn't pass, because you're not a failure. You got to the point where you could take the bar exam, you've done a lot. But we have to say, as we look at these numbers across the country and now with Florida, that you cannot stroll into the bar exam. You can't come in less than fully prepared. You can't come in halfway and say, maybe I'll try it and see what happens. I can tell you, having worked with Amanda and Bobka and Brianna and many others, the people that pass generally are the people that just go all out. They do the work, they do the assignments, and they really put in the effort. Now, if you were not successful, it doesn't necessarily mean you didn't do the work, but I think it's important to recognize that you've got to do that. One point, June suggested that I ask you, Bobka, because you did something that I think is wise. You actually made the decision to switch jurisdictions to give yourself a better chance of passing. Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah. And what was your thinking about that? What was the strategy behind that?
My strategy was nobody cares how you get to the top of the tree so long as you are at the top of the tree. So it's, hey, no, it's like a client is not going to come and ask you, are you barred in this state or are you a lawyer? Yes or no? That's the answer they ask you. And my thinking was, if I have taken California 4 times and I'm not seeing any improvement. Now, can I be a lawyer in another state and still be able to do what I want to do? Absolutely. And my thinking was, go to Georgia. Georgia is relatively easier compared to California, and the rest is history. So that was my approach.
And I think this is important because as we now start to turn to Florida, the first big state that's not in the UBE, for some people, it makes sense to consider, if you don't have to practice in Florida, if you don't want to live in Florida, don't take the Florida exam. I mean, flip out of it into a UBE or into Georgia and do another exam and come back to Florida later if you want to do it. And we're going to have the same advice in California. All right.
And I think,
yeah, go ahead.
I would say one more thing on that. Like, this just goes along with our changing world. Yes, it really depends on what you want to do. But even if your family is tied to a certain state, like being able to practice virtually now, depending on what you want to do, is doors are just opening and opening. Yeah. And just personally, like, I'm barred in 3 states, but I'm only physically located in one of them, and I practice in all 3. Just consider that, right? And consider what you want to do. And if you're unsure, seek out mentors, ask people who are doing what you're doing so you can make an informed decision before 2024.
Yeah. And Brianna, it's nice. You could be barred in 19 states. Well, I don't know, some crazy number. You and Amanda both. All of them. Yeah, that's right. You and Amanda could be in 40 states. So there you go. Pretty exciting stuff. All right, let's talk about Florida. And if you're not a Florida bar taker, I still think it's worth listening because this is the first big jurisdiction to release results. This is the canary in the coal mine. It's the leading edge, and it tells us a lot about what may be coming in other jurisdictions like New York, California, Texas. And by the way, Texas results come out tomorrow, Thursday. So we'll talk about those next week, and good luck to all the Texas UBE students. All right, in Florida, here are the results. The overall pass rate in Florida for February was 39%. The first time pass rate was 55%. The repeat bar taker rate was 26%. And there were roughly 1,500 bar takers. All right, let those numbers just wash over you for a minute. If we are comparing to last year in February, these are dramatically lower rates than we had a year ago. In February of 2022, it was a 51% overall and a 64% first time. And this is interesting, and we'll get to what the numbers mean. Florida has never, for many years, Florida has failed or refused to produce a repeat bar taker pass rate. We've had to go back and try and figure it out and calculate it and so on. The NCBE somehow managed to get Florida to publish a repeat taker pass rate. This is the first time, I think, in maybe 10 years that we've actually had that number. So that's a real number when we get the repeat rate of 26%. This is something new. Florida has, again, tried to deflect by only talking about the first time taker rate. So now we have an actual reported on the NCBE website of 26%. So we're going to assume that's an accurate number. But moving from 51% overall rate a year ago to 39% is a massive drop. This is a gut punch number. I want to start by saying that if you are one of the people who succeeded on the Florida exam, congratulations. Awesome job. We are so proud of you and we're so thrilled. I see a couple of people on this call who actually did pass. I'm seeing Joey. I'm assuming that's our Joey. And Joey, I know you're one of those people that passed, and congratulations. And we have a fair number of people who did pass. We also have the next group of people. We have a surprisingly large group of people who did not pass and missed the passing score by 1 or 2 or 3 points. Tracy asked me before we went live today, she said, if somebody hits that, if they're in that 1 or 2 point range, what happens next? And the answer is they pass. They'll pass the next exam. And I think we can be pretty confident in that over the years. Now, it's a good news, bad news. Obviously, the bad news is you didn't have the score you wanted, but you're right there and you can pass the exam next time. So clearly that group, we don't want you to give up. We don't want you to back away. And there were more of these numbers than we had seen previously. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute as to why I think that happened. Then we've got a group of people whose scores are outside of that 2 or 3 point range. To that group of people, I want to just start by saying, I know that this is disappointing and discouraging. However, you can pass this exam, but what you can't do is to repeat what you've been doing and pass this exam. And I think all of our coaches would agree with me. This is when you have to start looking at what else do you need to do? Come to boot camp, add photo reading, get coaching with one of our coaches, get some mentoring and assistance, do something different. And in the doing something different, you give yourself the best opportunity to be successful. What I can tell you statistically over the years is that when you get outside of about a 3 point scale point range, statistically, you are going to keep falling short of the passing number until you modify the inputs. In other words, the examiners would say, if you give us consistent inputs, we're going to give you consistent outputs. And I think they're right about that. They're pretty good about that. But if you are outside that 3 point margin of error, then you have to look at doing things differently, putting in more time, using mind maps. There's so many tools that we offer. And I'm not sure that there are any courses that offer more tools than what we've got. I think June's going to jump on here. She's got something, and we're going to see if she can keep from, can you talk without? Okay.
And this is important because I'm super sick right now, but I show up for you guys and you show up for me. And that's what I want to talk about, is showing up for yourself. Please take advantage of the group coaching calls. All one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many you want. It's super important to have that community, to have that support, to talk, to speak up, to come on video. Okay, that is showing up for yourself. You're like, Jen, that's so silly to turn my Zoom video on. It is showing up for you. It makes the difference. I'm just imploring you, do something different. Come to the group coaching calls. They're free. Why would you not? And you have got 1, 2, 3, 4 attorneys plus judge, attorney/judge doing group coaching calls. So I just implore you to please, because I know a lot of people on this call don't go to group coaching. Yeah. And I know some people do, and I love that you do, and I'm seeing names that do, but the ones that don't, it's time to do something different. See why the people that pass talk about why group coaching is so important. All right, that's it. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Jackson, I'd like to
Yeah.
jump in too on this a little bit.
Yeah.
When you look at law practice, this is an inherent part of law practice that you have started. Even though you are not possibly going to be in the bar, this time around, know that once you get into law practice, there are going to be cases that you'll win, or you'll win some. And there will be cases where you are not successful. And if you give up every time you have an unsuccessful result, then you don't belong in this profession, because it's like baseball. If you are worried about how many times you are not successful at the plate, and you are worried about having only 300%, 0.3% batting average, then you don't belong in that sport. And it's the same thing with law practice. This is a time to get yourself used to those ups and downs. And when you lose, the best thing you can do is go in, ask to speak with the judge for a few minutes, and ask for honest feedback. Judge, what did I do that was good here? What did I do that I could improve on? And so your group coaching opportunities, your boot camp opportunities, those are all the same types of things. There is nothing like the feedback that you get from Jackson on the personalized videos, and that you can get from us, to figure out how you're going to pull up by your bootstraps and get ready for the next time. Basically, the next time you're in front of the tribunal, or the next time you're in front of the court.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And as we look at a jurisdiction like Florida, and we look at those pass rates, I think that you can take some comfort in the fact that the numbers are as challenging as they are, in the sense that it doesn't mean that you are deficient. It is a tough exam. I want to talk a little bit about the scoring here, because it was an interesting test. The 3 essay subjects were and the 3 essay questions, which are in our books and materials, are pretty straightforward. And you might say, wouldn't that have raised all the scores? Well, what happens is, in Florida, like most jurisdictions, they get the multi-state score first. And the examiners are able to tell how many applicants of those 1,400 or 1,500 had passing multi-state scores. Now, I don't think there's a hard quota in Florida or most states, but there's a rough sense of how many new lawyers they want to admit in every exam. And so the examiners take that number off the multi-state, and they say, the 1,500, we've got 800 or 900 maybe that have passing scores before we get to the written part, day one. Then what happens is they start to manipulate the scoring of the essays to reflect what the overall number is that they're looking at. And so on this particular exam, the mean raw on the 3 essays is 43 to 46 points on a 100-point scale. That is a very high mean raw. And the way that the exam is scored is that your raw score is compared to the mean raw in each of those categories, the 6 categories, and then a scaled score is assigned. So if that mean raw is high, you got to write really good essays to get a passing scaled score. And this is one of those situations where you had to blow the essays out, really, to get the kind of scores that it took to be successful. Now, Tracy mentioned that I do personalized videos. If you were not successful on this exam, whether it's Florida or any other jurisdiction, what we ask you to do is send me your score sheet. And over the next few days and weeks, I will record a personalized video for you, looking at your score sheet and making specific recommendations. I will say that one of the things that's most frustrating to me when I do this is that I spend the time working on it, thinking about what I think you ought to be doing, and then I get a response back that says, thanks for the video, not going to do any of those things. Okay, you have a lifetime pass guarantee. We're not going to charge you extra to be in the course. However, if your results were outside that margin of error and you're not doing anything substantially different, I don't know how you can expect to get a different result. And I think that this is one of the keys. So here's what I'm going to be telling a lot of you. Come to boot camp. Makes a difference. Be a photo reader. If you weren't a photo reader, makes a difference. Work on mind maps, makes a difference. Get coaching with me or Amanda or Brianna or Tracy. It makes a difference. Get on the group coaching calls with Bob and June and all of our coaches. Do the things that will make a difference for you. If you're not going to do that, then you are really limiting your ability to be successful. So let me just open that up. Brianna, you got any thoughts about that? Because I know you were in that position once.
I went from, I'll give you just a very raw example. So I was scoring a 108 on my MBEs from the Texas bar and switching over to the UBE several years later and dedicating myself to Celebration Bar Review and dedicating myself to taking the exam and changing my mindset and changing the things that I did bumped me up to a 136.4, right? So it can be done. You have to be willing to tear down all of the things that you're used to doing and tear down all the things that you think have been taught to you and how to do things, and basically rebuild yourself back up, focusing on why you want this. Why do you want to be an attorney? Why do you need this passing score? What are you willing to sacrifice in order to achieve your goals? What are you willing to sacrifice to achieve your dreams? You're being faced with a concrete wall right now. So what are you going to do to tear it down? How are you going to kick it down and find your yes? So, and the only way you do that is by doing something different. Clearly, you've been down this path and you've been doing the things that you're used to doing and you haven't been successful. So you have to pivot. You have to. If you are unwilling to pivot and unwilling to change your frame of thought, you're never going to get to the finish line. Diving into photo reading, if you were a photo reader and you thought like you weren't doing it right, or you thought it was something quirky and you didn't dive into it. So some of the things that I did differently, mindset coaching with June was phenomenal. I cannot encourage you guys enough to join those calls. If you're struggling and you can't figure out what your barricade is, join her calls. Either join her calls or do a one-on-one personal coaching so you can figure out what that barricade is. You may have a completely different barricade than I did or anybody else. So join that call, figure it out, figure out what it could just be a mental block. So photo reading, if you didn't dive all in with photo reading, do the affirmations before and after. If you didn't do the one-on-one coaching, I promise you it's going to make your writing better. You are going to get better at the FLA and gain those extra points on the exam. Those are some of the things I did. I thought photo reading was just this thing that was out there and I didn't go all in. I went all in. I did mind mapping. The mindset coaching calls with June, I did something different. You don't go from 108 to 135 without changing it. So find out what works for you. If it's uncomfortable, dig into the uncomfort and get comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Bobka, you had to do the same thing, right? You had to you changed jurisdictions, but you also changed the way you were studying.
Oh, absolutely. And I totally agree with what Brianna said. And funny thing is, when I failed Georgia the first time, I failed by, I think, 7 or 8 points. And I was pissed. And when Jackson did that video and then he got back to me, I was in my feelings. I'm like, man, I don't want to hear this right now because I'm still salty. But then again, I took the emotion out of it. I'm like, hey, if this is what you want to do, this is what you need to do. And that changed my outlook on everything. My practice question, I was more intentional about doing the work. And what equally got me through was picture yourself as an attorney. And then if you lose a case, are you just going to say, hey, you know what, I give up. I'm going to stop the practice of law. Or are you going to take on more cases and be like, you know what, this one is a loss, but at the same time, does this stop me from practicing law? No. So it's a mindset thing. And then at the same time, applying yourself to the work, because there is no work and there is no gain without work. You have to put it in. How hungry are you to do it? It makes the difference. That's basically what I did.
Yeah, I think that's wisdom. Let me take a question that I'm getting from students and I'll throw it out to the panel. Question is, do I have enough time to prepare for July? I just got my results back. Do I have enough time to prepare for July? Amanda, what would you say to that?
Yeah, absolutely. year, people are just like finishing their graduation ceremonies. And I think we talked about this a little last week. So definitely, if we don't have time to delve in, you could go back and listen to last week's call about timing and getting started early, banking that time, because who knows what the next month holds for you in terms of family and job and things like that. So start early. Yeah.
Yeah. Along those same lines, we got a lot of questions. This was an example of one where somebody said, am I supposed to be skimming as I'm studying in the reading, or am I supposed to use the 3 to 4 hours to review an outline? I don't think I'm a fast or effective reader and I'm going to fall behind. I'm going to start by saying, this is a student who should be photo reading. I just think that's the obvious answer. You can photo read an outline in 10 minutes or less, and then use your time in mind mapping. I think that's really valuable. And I know, Amanda, you did mind maps that were like phenomenal. And the mind mapping process is a great way to learn, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of good tools out there in the course and other places like the MindMeister, but also just hand drawing them. Yeah, so that was good.
Yeah. And the student said, how do I learn the substantive law? You learn it by following the course. So if you are not a photo reader, we want you to spend 3 hours reading a section of the outline, but we don't want you to spend 6 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours. 3 hours is enough. And I think one of the things, Brianna, you do the time management workshop. It's important for people to stay on the schedule, isn't it? To follow the suggestions.
Yeah, you have to. If you don't, you're not going to get through the material and you're not going to be prepared for the exam. So you have to be acutely aware of the amount of time that you're putting into it, the amount of time that's allotted. Yeah, otherwise anxieties are going to start creeping up and then you'll go into the exam completely unprepared.
Yeah. One of the other things that we recognize over time is that when these results come out and you're licking your wounds, you have not been successful, it hurts, it's hard. However, you don't have the luxury of time between the February and July exams. There is not that extra 2 months in there to just kind of feel sorry for yourself and to be upset. And you're entitled to all of that, but you just don't get that luxury, right? You've got to be able to swing around and say, okay, we're getting back at it right now. And towards that end, we had a student that is retaking and said, do I have to go through the subjects in the same order the second time that I did the first time? The answer to that is no, you don't. You can go ahead if you have the information, if you're in a jurisdiction that told you, for example, how you did on each of the MBE subjects or gives you specific information about your essays, you can go ahead and reorder because you've got access to everything in the course and pick the subjects that you're weakest on. Any comments from you guys about, does that make sense? Start with the weaker areas and spend more time on them now? Amanda, you're not. Tracy, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I'd love to jump in here because if you are retaking in July, you already have a leg up on everyone that's graduating in the next 3 or 4 weeks because you have information, and information is king. You know where you need work and where you are already strong. And you have plenty of time to focus on the things that you need to improve. And the other things, you are basically in a review mode. So this is a perfect opportunity for you, and along with private coaching, for example, to really focus in and hone in on the things that kept you from passing the exam this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Amanda?
I think that is great. And those are all things that you can do on your own. You have a perfect idea of it. And of course, don't shy away and ignore the subjects you were strong in. You still want to keep going with those because you use it or lose it to a certain extent. But I think it's great that you're, again, banking some time. And I love the idea that Tracy's saying about the head start.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you were doing mind maps before, continue to expand those. If you weren't doing them, do them. I want to emphasize this because I've been watching the transition of people using mind maps versus people who are doing traditional note taking. I am seeing a distinct difference in results for the people that mind map. I just think mind mapping is a really effective way to get this material into your head, whether you're a photo reader or not. So I'm going to continue to encourage, and I know all of our coaches are encouraging people to mind map. And sometimes we get the comment, well, it takes time. Yeah, it does. But again, if you're a photo reader, you're reading the outline in 5 or 10 minutes. So you've saved yourself 3 to 6 hours. But even if you're a traditional student, the mind mapping, I think, pays huge dividends for the time that you invest. And if you're not doing that, I think you're not getting all the value that you should get out of the material. So I would encourage you to do that. So for this student who's already been through the course, has the leg up, but knows that, for example, civil procedure was a difficult subject, start in civil procedure. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Another student that got results back this week said, I'm only going to be able to study on weekends for the July exam. And that's a hard question when somebody says, I have a busy practice and I'm taking the exam, I'm retaking the exam, but I can only put in weekends. Let me throw this out to you guys first, and then I'll offer my response. Anybody want to jump into that quagmire?
I think there are a few things there. So one, are you currently practicing law and you're trying to get admitted to another jurisdiction? That would be the first thing. What is your situation?
Yeah.
Or two, are you economically disadvantaged and you can't afford to take time off from work and you're trying to get into law? So it's two very different situations. You can't tell anybody what to do. I'm certainly not a financial advisor. But one thing that I would highlight, just coming from me constantly discussing the equity issue on the bar, is there are real barriers to entering the market as a lawyer, right? But a lot of times, and many of you maybe heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which since has been critiqued by many people, and actually showing more that society-wise and economic-wise, people are marginalized actually, right, with not having as much money, but also in a thought process, in a scarcity mindset about and taught and isolated, right, to not use other resources that are out there. And I think that and also stigmatized when using those resources. I think that bears mentioning now because of the issue of, do I take time off from work? Do I do this? Do I sign up for another thing that Jackson is selling me because I can't afford it? And I was in that position. I grew up low SES. I didn't have anything in law school and I thought I had no one. Looking back, I would have invested more in myself. Looking back, I had other resources, but because I grew up in poverty, because I was trying to be the first lawyer in my family, I thought I had less than I did. And that's the real economic marginalization. So I'm not maybe commenting directly on this person, but I guess I'm challenging the why, right? Why can you only study on weekends? Maybe it's not just economics, maybe it's family, maybe you're caring for a sick member of your family, right? But I think that my ultimate message is to challenge the scarcity mindset in time and money and invest in yourself.
Yeah,
because I think far too often we don't hear that, right?
Yeah. I think that's really good. Thank you for that. Any of the other coaches want to weigh in on this question? It's a tough one.
Oh, considering I do some time management stuff, I love what Amanda was talking about. And that's almost exactly where I was going to go. I just want to expand on it a little bit because she's talking about the why. That's one of the first questions I sit down with my students when in our time management calls is we go through all of the actual responsibilities versus things that we just think we have to find that time that we can sacrifice. Can we sacrifice a little more sleep? Can we sacrifice dinner with friends? Can we sacrifice certain other things? Is there a certain way? And I don't want to discourage anybody from being religious or anything. I was just on the weekends and stuff. I just thought church, but is there a different way that you can carve out some of that time to be devoted to your religion? Where can you find the time? You only have 24 hours in a day. You're not going to find more. The only way you're going to get more time is if you give something up. When we do our time management calls, like I said, so that's one of them, right? So it's kind of the why. Is it important enough? Is it your priority? Are you cutting out everything else you possibly can? And then also it expands a little bit. I think we had a student, or I had a student bring this up to me at one point, that we did this on one of our calls talking about investing in yourselves. And they went and they invested, they took some money out of their 401k.
Yeah.
And You 401k is great because you can turn around and reinvest it back into yourself with interest. So there is money to be found if that's the issue. You just have to get a little creative.
Yeah. And we work really hard to make sure that the course is affordable. We have payment options and other things. I will also say, if you don't have a lot of time, come to boot camp. In 48 hours, we will supercharge your study. And I had somebody say, I'd have to give up a day of work. Really? So you would, that's true. You'd have to give up a whole day on Friday. And I'm not disparaging that, but really to be at boot camp could be a huge boost, and a single day off is there. June, I see you back. I know you must have something you want to say, because go ahead.
I want to just tag along on what Brianna said, because you guys, I get that it's like you feel like everybody's going, do this, do that, or you can, and really, have you really done it? Well, yes, Amanda, Brianna, and Bobka have really done it. Okay, because see, a while back, Brianna was my student and she didn't have enough time and she was struggling, and she woke up so early. That is what she sacrificed, and she hated it for a few weeks. She absolutely hated it, y'all. But after a few weeks, it was your what time?
This is my tiger time.
Tiger time. It was her tiger time. And she actually started looking forward to it because she didn't feel guilty. She didn't feel mom guilt of being pulled away from her kids. Okay. She didn't feel guilt of pulling away from her husband or her family or her other duties. She was able to feel like she was actually doing it all and giving to herself as well, all by waking up 1 hour earlier. And like I said, it was pulling teeth the first few weeks. She did not like it at all. But after a few weeks, she saw the benefit. That 1 hour of study time was so much deeper for her, so much better for her, so much more focused than if she'd have tried to do 4 hours every night. So just remember, the advice you're getting comes from actually it having been done. And on that, I'm out of breath. So keep going.
All right. Listen, we're gonna wrap up. There's obviously a lot more we could say, but I want to just point out that I've got this panel of people here who are extraordinary, and they are dedicated and they give so much to this process. And I am so appreciative of all of the resources that you all bring as coaches. And I just want you as students, whether you're in our course or if maybe you're just watching or listening to this podcast, I don't know of another bar review that does anything even remotely like this. This is a course that is focused on helping you, meeting you where you're at, making it affordable, making it work, finding a way. If you're struggling with how to allocate your time, we've got resources for that. If you're struggling with mindset, we can help you with that. If you're struggling with how to read and study and take questions, we can help you with all of that. There's a lot more that we can say about these things, and we will as we go along. But I think that ultimately what I want to leave you with is that as you're getting results in, if the results are not what you had hoped for, then take a quick minute, and grieve that result, and then move forward. Let us work with you. Let us come alongside you. Let us help you as we've helped others to be successful. The past results are not a prediction of how you're going to do in the future. Don't listen to that nonsense, okay? Because you're a repeat bar taker doesn't mean that you're not going to pass the bar exam. That is absolute and utter nonsense. We've got people that disprove that every day, every exam result that comes out. Keep your head up, keep working, keep your chin up, keep going, keep doing all the things you heard today on this call. There was a lot of wisdom here today. And as we get results out in Texas, we know New York is still on the way. We've still got California, we've got Georgia, we've got some big states out there. There's going to be a lot more information, a lot more to share with you. We'll be back next week to do that. I want to thank Bobka. So wonderful to have you with us, Bobka. Glad you could find the time. Tracy, we're glad to have you with us as always. Brianna and Amanda, thank you both. This is quite I'm pretty darn proud of this group. I got to tell you. And I'm proud of all of you who took your exams and you passed. I'm deeply excited for you and proud. I hope that you'll join me for interviews so that we can share your stories with the world. If you are one of the people that didn't get the result you wanted, don't give up. And when I ask people who succeeded what their advice is, it is always the same thing. It's don't give up, because the thrill of passing, the opportunity, the chance to change our profession from the inside is well worth the sacrifice. Hang in there. We'll get back to you. I will be doing videos and we will get scores and we will keep you informed. And we will see all of you again next Wednesday. Have a great study week and thanks for being with us. And with that, we're going to say bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.